Now here's the last in our series of journeys around a secret coastline.
I've just spent the night in Shotley Marina. Rather pleasant experience because they have baths as well as showers, which is a rarity. Very pleasant for the overnight traveller. We're going to lock out through the lock. Now that also is a rarity among marinas. We're going to go out through a lock. And then we're going to explore the River Deben and the River Or. Or is it the Ald? I hope to find out later. There's some controversy over that. And getting into those rivers is not easy, to say the least of it. So I think I'm going to need some help with that. The ex-RLNI lifeboat Redundant Hero finds herself back out among the busy commercial traffic of Harwich Harbour. Our journey takes us around the town of Felixstowe to Felixstowe Ferry and the tricky entrance to the River Deben. I hope to get as far as Woodbridge. After that, I plan to take on a local sailor with intimate knowledge of these tricky waters who's going to help me take Redundant Hero all the way up the Ald to Snape, and that's as far as boats can go. Felixstowe Ferry pilot, lifeboat Redundant Hero, over.
Yeah, I guess not much, mate. Yeah, lifeboat Redundant, Felixstowe Ferry pilot, yes, getting you.
We're at the green marker buoy. Can you come on board and help us into the harbour? Over.
Yeah, I'm just leaving the harbour now, and when I get to you, follow me in.
Roger, Felixstowe Ferry pilot, we look forward to seeing you, all right? Well, it may seem like an irrelevant luxury, but it's not. Look how close to the beach we are. This really is a very dodgy channel to get into, and this boat is not the easiest boat to handle, and single-handed today, I'd have been up and down from the chart table. It would have been a risky business, but this is lovely. Just follow. Odd times. There he goes. I just sit there on his tail. The Brinkley family have guided boats through this narrow entrance for generations. Sir, how much do we owe you?
Anything else you want, give us a call.
Very well, thank you. Charlie refuses to retire. Instead, he helps lost souls like me. And what a comfort to be inside the river. He continues a tradition. He knows the secrets of these waters better than anyone. Tackling the challenge of the difficult entrance to the Deben is worth it. The river soon opens out into a wide, protected estuary, often described as one of the finest unspoilt rivers in England. Certainly, time seems to stand still here. The Victorian steam yacht Myra has recently been lovingly restored by Peter Darby. Peter, what a beautiful thing to own, but it must take some looking after, doesn't she?
Oh yes, it's a full-time job. We've been about 13, 14 years doing the restoration work so far.
What sort of state was she in when you got her?
Semi-derelict.
What, rotten in the mud
No,
at that
not
stage?
rotten, no. She was afloat, but no equipment, no gear at all.
But a lot of the fittings, like this lovely table with its lovely craftsmanship and all these other things, they were there, or have you had to renew them?
We had the table made, but most of the other equipment was with the boat.
Well, when was she built?
1893.
What a beautiful memorial to Victorian ingenuity and engineering. The Queen ought to send this engine a telegram when it reaches its centenary.
Luckily, the old boy who had her for years really did nothing with her, but he had in his shed a lot of the original equipment, such as there's a big bronze capstan, the Blue Delft China toilet, all big ventilators, ship's wheel, and the things that really matter that you can't replace.
Woodbridge was the Felixstowe of the 17th century. Cheese, salt, wool and wood used to be stacked up on these sea walls. Today, the famous restored tide mill attracts holidaymakers who walk where merchants once talked of trade with newly discovered parts of the world. Pleasure boats now lie where the wooden warships of Tudor England waited to challenge any overambitious European state. And yes, that is another redundant lifeboat. There's an understandably strong sense of history on these waters. I'm meeting a father and son team who spend their spare time restoring traditional commercial boats. Robert Simper has promised to try to catch my supper.
Hello, Robert. Well done.
Hello there.
This tide really makes you go sideways, doesn't it?
Yes, it is, Fred.
Now then, Robert, where would you like me to be?
I think if you come down here,
Okay.
put up the mizzen to start with, and then he'll put up the forelug. Come on. Okay, pull it in.
So all this detail of the rope round the edge of the mast and the cringles and the reefing points and all the rest of it.
Yes.
What about the tackle? That's the right sort of period too, is it?
That is, yes. Fortunately, when we were doing it, we met an elderly fisherman at Southwold who told us how to do that. That particular, the way that puts on there, so you can pick up on the cringles all the way up.
Right.
Also,
Do you put them all on when you reef, or
yeah,
just,
when you
or
reef,
just the two?
you have a big hook, and then as you
Yeah.
reef, you just keep putting it in each cringle
That's
further
so
up.
clever, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's all very, when we did it up, we didn't understand why everything, the various different fittings. But once we started to sail it, and especially when we started to go herring drifting in it, we then understood fully why everything was in the place
Yes.
it was.
It's a completely different thing. Right, okay, I'll undo it now. That's okay.
Right.
We know how to sew it. Yeah.
Put it round the other side.
Well, Robert, this is lovely. Thank you very much. I shall look forward to my supper tonight after you've done this bit of fishing. When would this kind of fishing have last been done?
And I think with a sailing boat, probably not till just after the last war, till about 40 years ago.
Can I do anything? Do I push that out of the way?
Yeah, can you hold that? Once the tide
it
takes
was going in a big way in the 1920s. It was a big fishery on the Suffolk coast.
And what's the principle of it? I mean, you let that buoy out there, and then you're sort of feeding the net over the side, and then what happens?
Well, I think in the right conditions, what's supposed to happen is you're really putting a curtain of net just hanging down from the surface of the water. There's a curtain, you can see it dropping down.
Yes.
As herring are surface feeding fish and catch into it.
But there's no protection on a boat like this, is there? No
no,
shelter?
none at all. No.
Nowhere to sit down and have a
No.
meal or, you know, have 40 winks. Just,
I have heard sometimes the Southwold boats. I months years ago spoke to an old Southwold fisherman who'd, when he was a boy, they'd been driven south by a gale and they'd gone to Orford and then lived in these boats under sails for several days. They'd pulled them up on the beach and just lived under the sails for several days until the weather was good enough for them to sail home. And also the Thorpe Nest fishermen used to come down the coast and work off Shingle Street, and they would turn one boat upside down and then use that as a sort of house, and then go off fishing in the other boat.
What are the chances of catching something?
Today, nil, I would think.
Never mind. The sight of a 100-year-old drifter in working condition is reward enough. Well, I suppose in windy conditions like that, the chances of actually catching any herring were always pretty remote. So I'm going to have to make do for my evening meal with this. Bit of an iron, really. Made in Norway, unfortunately. Never mind, I'm not proud. Take care not to spill any of the juice. There they are. Delicious roll mops. The next part of my journey promises to be even more difficult, but just as rewarding. My salvation comes in the form of the yachting journalist and writer David Pelly. This rendezvous is right by a place where many clandestine meetings have been held over the years.
Welcome, David. Good to see you. Come on board, David.
David is going to help me navigate the challenging entrance to the Ald. Or should it be the Ore?
Come on in, David. Come into my boudoir. Functional, I think you'll describe the
Let me just take this off.
environment here.
Like many writers, David is fascinated with the history and background to this mysterious and once secret piece of Suffolk coastline.
Tell you, I was interested to look at that spectacular house over there. Has it got a story attached to it?
Yes, it has. That's Bawdsey Manor, which plays a very important part in the history of radar, because in 1935 it was bought by the Air Ministry as a kind of secret hideaway for the team that were developing the first radar sets. And this was the world's first operational radar station.
That's fantastic. And this, I mean, had a major hand in our winning the Second World War.
Yes, it did. And the extraordinary thing is, for once in their lives, the British government moved really quickly. They got the whole thing up and running in less than 3 years.
That's fantastic. Is that what that mast is there for as well?
Yes, there was a whole row of those, which was part of what they called the chain home, which defended the east coast and the south coast.
Anyway, come on, let's have a look at this river.
Right.
Imagine navigating a large vessel under sail through a shallow and constantly changing river entrance like this before the age of charts and echo sounders. That's just what the old traders did. The sandbanks change their position quicker than anybody can update official charts. Local yacht clubs are forced to distribute a fast set of photocopies after every storm.
Oh, I see the river now.
Finally it appeared.
Yes. Isn't that extraordinary?
The tide will be sucking us strongly in now.
And what sort of depth do you get at high water here?
We should get about 10 feet in high water.
That's it. Gosh, that's not much, is it? But this was open to commercial traffic in the old days.
Yes, it was. And fully laden sailing barges would come in here.
That's extraordinary.
They must have been jolly brave men.
The river runs parallel to the sea for 9 miles. It's never more than a couple of 100 yards from the open sea. The entrance is moving south inexorably at the expense of the fast-eroding Suffolk coastline. The result is a lonely spit of gravelly land which was quickly seized on by the military authorities as an ideal place to conduct experiments and secret trials.
What are those things over there? They look like baby Wembley stadiums or something. They're extraordinary.
They were laboratories built for testing the fuses of atomic weapons, if you can imagine that. That bit of land has been used for military experiments for many years because it was remote and they didn't think many people would get hurt if it blew up.
Further upstream, the river changes its name from the Ore to the Ald, in spite of centuries of debate. Barges used to come here to load up with handmade bricks. The combination of good local clay and this protected waterway once prompted a local landowner to start a brickworks.
Now that the sailing barge is a museum piece, you might expect the making of bricks by hand to have passed into history as well. Not so. Against all odds and with no apparent help from modern technology, handmade Aldborough bricks are still in production. The man in charge is Trevor Hughes.
Mr. Hughes.
Hello, Chris.
It's lovely to see you.
Aldborough Brickworks.
Well, it's fantastic. I must say, my first impression of the place is that it's not exactly what I would describe as high-tech. It all looks quite sort of low-tech to me.
Well, we've been here rather a long while. The first mention of brickworks in Aldborough was 1624 in the Barrow records.
Wow.
The kilns here were put in 1964.
So the oil is coming through all this sort of plumbing and pipes that we
That's
can
right,
see.
yes. We use the old Scotch kiln, which is an updraft kiln. You put your heat in the bottom and it goes through the bricks and straight out the top.
And that's it? So open to the air at the top?
That's right, yes.
No chimneys here at all?
No, none at all. No, the actual building itself acts as a chimney. And this is where we make all our handmade specials.
That's amazing.
We make something like about 60,000 roughly a year.
60,000 a year?
Yes, of all shapes and sizes.
And how many people have you got hand making?
I've got 3 altogether. Not all the while, just 2 here today.
Can we go and have a closer look?
Paul is making plinth bricks. You'll very often see them on a building about 2 foot off the ground where they reduce the size of the brickwork.
What, like where there's a fat wall at the bottom and then it gets...
That's right,
I know, I've
yes.
seen it, yes.
A mould will cost you anything in between £40 and £65, depending on how much carving there is in it. And we keep all our old moulds and mark them so that some of the moulds are sort of 50, 60 years old. The red clay is fairly local to Suffolk and Norfolk, and there's, I suppose, about 700 or 800 different works at one time being in the district.
And Aldborough has another traditional industry, boat building. In this yard, a replica of the famous transatlantic veteran Jester is being built by Peter Wilson.
I want to know all about this exciting project you're working on.
Well, we were asked to tender to build a replica of Jester, which was one of the most famous single-handed transatlantic boats ever to race. And I was delighted to put a price on it, because although the upper works of the boat are somewhat unusual, the hull is absolutely super. And anyway, it's rather fun to build a wooden boat.
The original Jester was the brainchild of Blondie Hasler, one of the cockleshell heroes of World War II. He pioneered the idea of racing across the Atlantic in 1960. Then the boat passed into the hands of Mike Ritchie and continued to participate in every transatlantic race until, tragically, Jester was lost on her 14th crossing.
We had drawings for the hull, which is a standard folk boat hull, but we had very little to go on for the upper works and the accommodation. Blondie Hasler's notebooks, photocopies, semi-legible, somewhat dubious dimensions in some places, but a large number of photographs. Unfortunately, of course, most of these were really taken of Mike Ritchie sailing the boat and working the boat, and not of the boat, so he was nearly always in the way of what we were trying to look at.
So you've got to look round him in the photographs to see what's behind him.
We had to indeed try and bend round him.
Obviously, from the outside, this green superstructure is not a standard boat that I've ever seen before, at any rate.
Well, that was mostly what came off the photos, but that was Hasler's idea to build a boat that could be sailed without actually having to go out and get wet, by one person doing all of it virtually through one hatch, and very easily managed. And as such, it was said that Jester, when she was junk-rigged, was about as manoeuvrable as a London taxi. I think probably only about as fast.
Very few strangers try to go the extra 6 miles upriver to the old maltings at Snape, and you can understand why. We snake backwards and forwards, following an apparently invisible channel marked by withies, sometimes only a few feet apart.
This is so far-fetched, I'm beginning not to believe you.
You've got to believe it. This is Icon Cliff, which I think is one of the prettiest anchorages on the east coast.
It's absolutely lovely. Beautiful. I have been here before, and I'm looking at birds with a friend of mine, and it's absolutely lovely here. But I've never seen a boat this big doing this bit of water, I don't think. Or perhaps they do come, and I just haven't seen them.
Well, they used to get up here with fully laden barges.
Even up as far as this?
Yes, indeed, up as far as the Maltings.
And with nothing but these little bits of stick with green polythene on them to guide them. Not polythene in those days, obviously.
They were just very good sailors in those days.
On this river, it's certainly better to arrive than to travel. But this is a worthwhile end to a difficult journey. After all, we're without doubt the only lifeboat to tie up on this quay.
Well navigated, David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. That was terrific fun.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Very much indeed.
Hope the rest of it goes as well.
Well, thanks a lot. See you again.
Goodbye.
Bye.
The Maltings at Snape are a rambling relic of East Anglia's agricultural prowess. The buildings now have a variety of uses, from art gallery to holiday retreat. But the most famous part is the concert hall, masterminded by the composer Benjamin Britten and the singer Peter Pears. It's the perfect setting for a school of music, and it's expanding its interests and achievements thanks to the work of people like Kieran Cooper.
This is obviously one of the best-known concert halls in the world, the Maltings at Snape, and the Aldborough Festival is very famous. So are the two people who started the whole thing going, Peter Pears and Benjamin Britten. But what happens here in between the festivals?
Well, since the concert hall was built or converted in 1967, Aldborough became a rather different prospect, because suddenly we had this 800-seater hall that was only being used for 17 days of the year. So now we've developed, and we have concerts a lot of the year round, still in individual festivals. We have a series at Christmas, a series at Easter, and what's become very popular, a series called the BT Snape Proms, which runs through August. A concert every night with some seats taken out so people can bring cushions and sit down. And we have a complete wide range of music then. We have jazz, we have folk, we have dance sometimes. And so it means that the building is actually occupied quite a lot of the time for concerts.
The masterclass is where the dedicated musician tries to improve on apparent perfection.
Well, what a delightful way to end this part of our exploration of this wonderful coastline of the east of England, our secret coastline. We've met some fascinating people. We've seen some of the most beautiful landscapes in the country, in my view. In fact, I'm beginning to wonder whether perhaps we ought not to have kept it a secret all along. Well, it's too late now. Never mind. Goodbye.
Next week, a documentary looks at the unique history of the Caistor-on-Sea lifeboat. That's No Turning Back at 6 next Sunday.